This is Courtney Lilly, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft script writing software, the entertainment industry standard for script writing worldwide. My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 24 for Wednesday, June 15th, 2011. Well, today I am so excited to bring you an interview with writer-producer Courtney Lilly. He's LA-based, and he has written for a whole pile of shows, including Arrested Development, Everybody Hates Chris, My Boys, The Cleveland Show, and you are going to have a lot of fun hearing his story about how he got to Hollywood and how he got on all those great shows. Before we continue with the interview, just a few details to get out of the way. One of them is the homework that is on the table, and that is Elephant Bucks by Sheldon Bowl. Since today's interview is talking about comedy writing, and in particular, talking about single camera comedy writing, that's what Courtney Lilly has done most of. Elephant Bucks is all about writing sitcoms, so I urge you to buy it, read it. It's an excellent, excellent book, a great companion to Ellen Sandler's TV Writer's Workbook, which we talked about before. You can buy that at tvwriterpodcast.com. Go to the store, and you'll see a link that you can buy that, and actually a little bit of that goes to help support the podcast. So a great book for your shelf. Don't forget the TV Writer Chat every Sunday night. That's at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Just go on Twitter and use the hashtag TV Writer Chat, or if you go to tvwriterchat.com, you can find out how to enter a chat room, which auto enters that hashtag for you. It's a little bit easier to get involved that way. We've got some great topics. You can find out the list of topics that are coming up by going to tvwriterchat.com. It's for 1 hour every Sunday night, and it's definitely worth your time. Don't forget to check out, when you're at the tvwriterpodcast.com site, the Twitter database, which is over 700 writers and continues to climb. You can follow me on Twitter, at Gray Jones is my handle. You can also follow Courtney Lilly on Twitter, at Courtney Lilly, just like his name. And you're going to have a lot of fun by following his tweets, because he does tweet jokes, though he does warn that he doesn't tweet that many, because usually he's tired at the end of a day of comedy writing. But don't forget to go to scriptmag.com, our partner on this podcast, for lots of great resources, including the Balls of Steel articles by Gene Bowerman, and also Chad Gervich's very knowledgeable articles on TV writing. But for now, without further ado, let's roll with my interview with Courtney Lilly. Enjoy. My name is Gray Jones, and I'm here with TV writer-producer Courtney Lilly, best known for Arrested Development, Everybody Hates Chris, My Boys, The Cleveland Show. Well, hey, a whole lot more than that. How you doing, Courtney?
Good. Yourself? How about you?
Doing very, very well. We had a little bit of a challenging time with a fire alarm, but we got through that, and it's not ringing now, so I think we'll be okay.
Success.
Yeah. So I just can't wait to hear your story. Where did you get started? Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up kind of a little bit all over the place. I was born in Spokane, Washington, but we moved around a little bit, lived in Ohio, lived outside of Seattle for a bit, but like outside of Philadelphia, Westchester, Pennsylvania is where I went to high school, and that's my home. That's where I'm from. My parents are still out that way. So like, I guess I'm a Philadelphia guy, East Coast, but I understand the West Coast living, which is what I've done now. And I've lived out in LA for 11 years now. So honestly, that's as long as I've lived anywhere else. So,
And so from Philadelphia, did you start writing there? Were you writing in school, or when did that start?
Well, I went to Columbia in New York for college, and I knew there I thought I was going to be like a sportscaster. I was involved with the radio station there. I did some sports writing for the newspaper, and so like sports writing was kind of, and journalism was kind of the road I thought I was going to be on. I knew I wanted to write, but I knew nothing about writing for television. I didn't know that a lot of people come out here, you're a PA and you work your way up to a writer assistant. I didn't know any of those paths at all. So, literally my first job out of college, I worked in Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island for the Providence Journal Bulletin. And I was a reporter, and I covered two towns on the Rhode Island Connecticut border, Hopkinton and Richmond, and they, didn't have a ton of people, but like it was a great experience, and I was, I met a lot of great people, but I also figured out I was not meant to be a journalist pretty early on,
Yeah.
and so I lasted at that job. It was a great opportunity and great people, and like I still respect journalists to this day because, honestly, the curiosity in that profession is so massive, and it's like the same thing you have as a writer. It's just a different tool, different tools that I didn't necessarily have. But yeah, so after about 8 months, I left there, moved back to New York City, worked on a website for a little while, and kind of was trying to figure out what to do, was thinking about grad school, and again, like no idea how to move out to LA. I didn't know anybody here, any of that kind of stuff. And in the late 90s, I had a friend who was like, Nickelodeon has this writing fellowship program. I know you're kind of interested in writing TV. So she forwarded me the information. And I knew I was so ignorant about television writing at this point. And this is like, again, this is the late 90s. And so like, obviously the internet's happening, but it's not happening like it is now, where it's just like, well, I'll just do a Google search of this. Or I'll just search this. I'm curious about it. Like literally, I didn't know anything about it. My first thought wasn't to like look stuff online, and there wasn't a lot of information when you did start looking at stuff online. And, so I put together a Simpsons spec script just because it was a show I knew well and I watched a lot of and I had an idea for. And I went to Barnes and Nobles and bought some Frasier scripts because they had some of those and some other things, and learned how to format it kind of like that, which is different from animation, but still the people at Nickelodeon were forgiving, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. So yeah, I wrote my spec, sent it in a 3-ring binder, not like the 3-hole punch, like you're supposed to like a 3-ring binder, because I just didn't. That's how ignorant I was of the whole process. And through all those mistakes of formatting and bindering and all that other kind of stuff, Karen Horn, who was running the program at Nickelodeon at the time, saw enough in the writing that I got the fellowship. It was the first year of the Nickelodeon fellowship, which is still running, and that moved me out to Los Angeles, and that was in 2000. I moved out here. So it was a lot of luck. I think it was a lot that had to do with it was the first year of the program, and this again, like internet wasn't huge, and so like not as many people outside of like Los Angeles really knew about it, and New York and all that other kind of stuff. So like now they have like a ton of applicants, and if I had to compete against them, I wouldn't have had a chance. Not a chance at all, because I was too green. But I wrote some stuff that was, all right and pretty funny, and got me out there for the fellowship, and gave me a place to land for a year. So it was big. It was very helpful.
Very, very cool. Well, I've heard nothing but great things about all the fellowships.
Yeah. I'm a big booster for those because I think they really kind of bring outside voices in a lot of ways, which is positive. Because again, like there are tons of people with stories who were in the situation where I was still in New York, and, I'd gone to school with a good film program, even though I didn't participate in it, so like I wasn't so far outside, but there are people everywhere in like Texas and Mississippi and Oklahoma, and all these people have stories who are involved in this medium and want to get involved. And it's just hard if you don't know people necessarily. But if you can write, that's the big thing. And I think they open a lot of doors that way.
Very cool. So it was a Nickelodeon fellowship, and your first IMDb credit is Invader Zim, which I'm guessing is a Nickelodeon show. So how did the one lead to the other?
Well, Invader Zim, basically the great thing about the fellowship for me is I like learning on the job. And the Nickelodeon Fellowship, the first year I was there, they're just kind of like, all right, so you're going to be one of the animation fellows, and your job is going to be to work for the show Invader Zim. And so like they just kind of plopped me in there, and I was like one of their writing fellows, interns, people. And so like I worked on that show for a year, and everybody was great over there. Invader Zim was a show created by Jonah Vasquez, who's a comic book guy, super, super talented dude. And it's kind of like a little bit of a cult classic-y show in a way. It was not on the air very long. It was about an alien who was really short for his species, and he had like have a Napoleonic complex, and his whole thing was to go out and take over the Earth, and by whatever means necessary, like exploding things, blowing things up. But he was incompetent, and there was one kid who in his neighborhood, and he posed as like a fourth grader, and so there's a kid in his neighborhood who knew he was an alien because it was pretty obvious he was green, I mean, so it was a comedy. It was very funny. Some of the difficulties came in that like it's hard to do a show about what is essentially an alien species terrorist after 9/11.
Oh, right.
So like those were some of the things where it's like, oh, all of a sudden some of this stuff isn't as funny anymore when it's trying to. to destroy things. But I gotta say, it was a great experience. I liked working with everybody I worked with. It gave me an office to go to, a place to go immediately when I moved out here, and I didn't soul and, was 3,000 miles away from my home and my family and all that other kind of stuff. And it just gave me a launching pad too, as much as anything, to kind of get into the business, learn a little bit and meet some people, just kind of get my feet underneath me. So it was great. And the show, I mean, it's on DVD. It's a very funny show. I think they still repeat it every now and again. It's an odd, quirky show. I will say it was probably a little bit ahead of its time. So I was lucky in that regard, too, to land on a show that was very kind of different.
Well, it sounds fun.
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely fun.
So now the animation didn't last long because by 2004, you were on Arrested Development, right?
Yes. The fellowship at Nickelodeon was for a year. So that was like 2000, 2001. And the ones I wrote that ended up on my IMDb were freelance episodes that I wrote after that. And so for about 2 years after the Nickelodeon fellowship, I did the very typical Los Angeles temping and trying to freelance write phase, which was a lot of temping and not as much freelance writing. Some of it in animation, like there's a cartoon, Static Shock, that I co-wrote an episode for, and the cartoon Arthur on PBS co-wrote one of the things just to kind of keep me going a little bit that my managers would hook me up with, and so on and so forth. So that was good, but it was tough. It was, struggle times and so on and so forth. But my eye was always to move into primetime comedy anyway. And that was a nice thing about Invader Zim too, is that a very strong comedic voice there. So it was, and it was as a mature comedic voice for a kid's show on Nickelodeon too. So those things played into my hands and allowed me to develop. And so I kept writing some specs and eventually wrote something that, got the attention of, a manager who was able to help me, get some meetings. And then, I landed on Arrested Development for the first 2 seasons, which was awesome because that was talk about a very talented staff to be around and people who you're learning for. The nice thing about TV writing to me is it's a very collaborative thing. You're always with your peers and you're always kind of learning something. You're being challenged. Your experiences are growing. And so as somebody who is new, and Invader Zim was a kind of a different show, we didn't really have a writer's room as much as we just kind of pitched things and went out and write things and so on and so forth. Being immersed in a writer's room like that, with that culture and that much experience and that much talent it cut years off the learning curve. So that was awesome. And everybody was great over there too. So it was a great show to write for too, and to be a part of because, it's funny. So that was pretty great.
Well, I guess with any TV staff, there's always all levels. There's the people coming in, there's the mid-level, there's the co-producer, the producer, and so it's I guess always an opportunity to learn from the more experienced people in the room. But especially in comedy, everybody's pitching, right?
Yes, yeah. It's funny because definitely the idea when I first got out here was, and you would hear that a lot. It was kind of okay, so you're a staff writer. You're there to learn. You're not there to talk as much, and you kind of, just kind of figure things out and get the lay of the land. And that's definitely still true as far as, and again, you always have to read the room, but it's still kind of true. You're not there to come in there and, take the world by storm because generally you don't know as much, But I will say that things are different now. Nobody's expected to be deadweight. Everybody's there to contribute into a way that, and again, this may be just my, misconception of it, but it seems as though, back when there were a gajillion sitcoms on in the 80s and 90s, and they would have staffs of 20 people, you have 4 or 5 staff writers, and you would carry some, and so they would learn and figure some things out, and figure out which ones were good, which ones weren't, and so on and so forth. But it was a slower, more patient, kind of way of dealing with things. And again, for the stories I heard, that's what it kind of seemed like. Whereas, definitely now I say you got to swim right away. It's a pressure filled situation. Everybody I've worked with for the most part has been great and has been great to young writers and supportive of young writers. But they also want to see, what you can do so that you're not just taking up space. So, I think that's some of the reality that's changed a little bit. And so it's always helpful to be in a situation like with Arrested Development. For me, when I was younger and new and trying to figure things out, that there were really supportive people who were great about when you would pitch stuff, and some of it would be terrible, of course, just not making you feel like you didn't belong there, even if you didn't. That, and finding the ways to encourage you. And so that you would, and again, obviously they would see something in what you were saying and you'd be able to move forward and so on and so forth. But I was very fortunate in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So you were there for 1 or 2 seasons?
2 seasons.
Two seasons.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And then how did that lead to Everybody Hates Chris?
After the first 2 seasons there at Arrested Development, Chris Rock was somebody who's, as a young black fan of comedy,
Mm-hmm.
Chris Rock, you can't really get any bigger than that. And so you hear that there's a show that he's doing and so on and so forth. And it was a very funny pilot. And, so I was interested in that and went out in some meetings and I met Ollie Leroy, who ran the show. And, I was just fortunate there to get that job after Arrested. And, one of the things about like comedy writing that's funny is like, to me, especially when you're a younger writer or a staff writer or something like that, you're always working for the showrunner and you're trying to make your name there and you want to stay there and you want to kind of, make a reputation there.
Mm-hmm.
But shows kind of come and go. Like you never know. You may only get 3 episodes of a show before it's pulled from the air. Anything can happen. And so as much as you're working to make a mark on the showrunner, who's often very busy and is like dealing with production aspects and all these other kind of things, you don't always have that opportunity. They're out of the room a lot of times too. You're also working for the other people on the show who have, who know a lot of people. It's a very small business a lot of times. It seems like everybody kind of knows everybody. So like when it comes time to go for a meeting on another show, the showrunner of that new show you're kind of meeting on will call up the person who knows who worked with you. And it's a very simple process. They ask like, oh, what was this person like to work with? Because nobody's going to put their self on the line and sit there and say like, oh yeah, no, they were good unless you were good, unless you could work. So like, I always kind of tell people that like you're working as much, for the showrunner, and obviously you're trying to make that show better and trying to help their vision get out there, but you're also working with and for the people who are, the co-producers and the executive producers and the co-executive producers who aren't the showrunners. They are as important as anybody else, and you want to, there's times like there are people who are very strategic and save their best pitches for when the showrunner's in the room and all that other kind of stuff. But, to me, you're always working. You're always doing it because like people want to know that you're good because it's going to come up later and you're going to need to get a recommendation from somebody. So, that's a long way of saying that like when it got to, Everybody Hates Chris time, there was somebody, who I worked with in Arrested Development, we knew some people. And so they able to put in a good word and was over there for a little bit.
Very, very wise. Very cool. And how did the rooms compare between Arrested Development and Everybody Hates Chris? When you first walked in to Everybody Hates Chris, what was your first impression?
It was different. It was like every room is different culturally. Mm-hmm. So like that was the big thing because going from like my first room to the next one and seeing how vastly different, and it's just personalities really. It is not like, some showrunners are very hands-on and you just kind of group write everything. And some shows, like, you just pitch the outlines to the studio and network, and some shows you end up writing them and turning them in. And so there's a different process. That was the kind of like the big thing to see, that like it was different everywhere. That was kind of the biggest surprise to me. It was like, oh, this is different than what we did over here, and so like that was the big difference. Arrested Development, of course, is a different animal, and there were long hours, and Everybody Hates Chris didn't have as long an hours. Mm-hmm. That was kind of one of the things that you took away and you noticed. But it's still writing and breaking a sitcom. It's still like the elements are basically the same, and it's almost like cooking. You're still kind of, you're always, like you're making soup. So you're doing, you got the carrots or all these other kind of things. And then like, it's how it all blends together that ends up kind of being the different thing, but at the end of the day, it's soup, Mm-hmm. So that was the thing you kind of noticed the most. And every room I've been in has been different culturally, and even adding just a couple, when you're on a show and like people move and you lose a couple people and you bring in a couple new people, that kind of changes the dynamic in a way that's always interesting. So. Mm-hmm.
Well, you spent quite a bit of time in the room for My Boys. That was what you did after Everybody Hates Chris, and now that it seems like a little bit of a different flavor. Actually, it looks like a cool show. I never watched that one, but what can you tell me about My Boys? You were on that for quite a while.
It was a lot of fun. It was I guess TBS was branching out and started doing more original comedies, and we were one of the first ones to do that. And Betsy Thomas, who ran that show and created it, she was just great to work for. And she was, I felt like that was a place, like after your first couple of jobs, you're sitting there and you've got your feet underneath you a little bit, and people kind of know who you are and a little bit what to expect and all that kind of stuff. But like definitely under Betsy, I just grew a lot. She's a great showrunner, very supportive, very funny woman, and it was a very fun show to work on. It was, I've been fortunate, in a lot of the shows I've worked on are very different in kind of style, where you work on Arrested Development, which is like, very like, it's like soap, and but it's still a family sitcom in a lot of ways, which people don't really point out, I think, as often as they should, that it's very structurally like a family sitcom. And, you're dealing with those kind of things. And the move on to Everybody Hates Chris was definitely, a family sitcom, but it's also, is a black sitcom. So like you have a different kind of way of dealing with family. And then moving on to My Boys, which was, young adults, kind of like frenzy sitcom with very likable characters who were, the actors were great. And it was just a fun show to be on, and a fun show to be around, and I think that's like, whereas, some of the other shows, a lot of the shows I worked on, it's like you're pressing out comedy and you're doing the jokes and all that kind of stuff. I think the main thing with My Boys, a different style of comedy, it's like it's coming out of everybody liking each other and the fun of people hanging out together. It's about a tom girl who all her best friends were guys, and they played poker and softball, and just kind of, what happens when you have a group of friends who are that close, and it was, it felt really true, and it's a great place to work. And it was, like I said, a really super talented cast, Jordana Spiro and Jim Gaffigan, and it was a really, it was a good 3 years to spend time there. And that was also just it's a cable show, so it was a really small staff, generally speaking, like 6 or 7 people.
How many people?
6 or 7 usually, right? So not that like network staffs are as huge, and well, we'll get to animation in a second, but like not that the network staffs are as huge, but like not like they used to be with 18, 20, so on and so forth people, like in the Roseanne rooms and so on and so forth. But it's nice. The show was intimate, and the setting and the way we ran the room, because there were so few of us, it was intimate. It was great. It was great.
And also in My Boys, that was when you started to move up the ranks a little bit in terms of becoming a producer, and even on to supervising producer. So you took on a few more duties in terms of, did that mean that you got to go to the set? Were you involved in casting and things like that? Well,
it depends. Not as, like My Boys, we were very, we were always on the set for your episode, and we didn't do a ton of episodes. We do like 9 episodes a season, and we get a lot of the writing done ahead of time. And Betsy has a lot of background in theater, and she's great on the set and working with the actors. And so we'd be on there, and you'd see what's going on, and things would kind of change and adjust from the script as you would see it on the stage. And so you're kind of always involved with that process. So much of it is just moving up in your career, and it's like, as much as the levels kind of mean something, they also mean like, Writers Guild minimums for how much you can get paid. A lot of it's just natural to like your experience as you like, so it wasn't so much like, okay, well now you're a producer, and so you're going to do this, this, and this. It's more like, well, you're doing this long enough, and I trust you. And so I would say, just because of the nature of My Boys, I was on the set more, but I also don't think it was just like, well, now that you are a, supervising producer, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. It was this, like, again, Arrested Development, even if you were co-EP on the show, you weren't on the set that much because we needed to write. That's kind of what we were doing. And it was a different kind of atmosphere, and the same kind of with, Everybody Hates Chris. So really with experience, you get more responsibility, but it's not like there are like, defined kind of like, this is what so-and-so does, and when you move up next year, this is what you're going to do. And so it's all a question of the showrunner too. So
yeah. Well, I definitely have heard of showrunners that do make those delineations, but do you think part of that too was it being a cable show and a smaller staff, or just different room, different flavor?
Yeah, I think, the thing I've always found is like, again, like everybody has their process, and you're at the whim of the process of the showrunner, and like, Betsy had a way that she liked running the show, and like, again, Ali Leroy on Everybody Hates Chris had a way he liked doing it, and Mitch on Arrested Development had a way he liked doing it. And so like, if you put them in a different situation where they only have a small writing staff, they're going to try to use their staff in a certain way to make it easier on them. So I think a lot of it's the condition. Again, like, the fact that we were a cable show, we had only 6 writers, there were more hands on deck kind of aspect to it. But again, it seems to me so much about personality. it could have been a show where we have a whole staff and Bessie's just like, you know what, forget it, I'm going to write all the episodes myself. You know, again, like 9 or 10 episodes. And there are showrunners who would do that, who, you know, you come in, you pitch some ideas, and they go off and they write. You know, it's really up to what the person wants to do with their show and how they want to use their staff. And so that's kind of what it was. And again, that's the one thing I've seen carry over as much. It's like the way the culture of a show kind of goes from the top down. And so like you adjust to that, how each person kind of runs it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's step away from TV for a second, because you actually wrote a feature. You said it was an indie feature. It sounds a lot of fun. I'm Through with White Girls, The Inevitable Undoing of Jay Brooks. Yeah. Tell me about that.
It was, you know, about, this is getting ages and ages ago now, like right around the end of my Nickelodeon fellowship, like 2001-ish or something. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm out here and I'm just trying to write anything, you know, anything that'll land me a job after the fellowship. And so I had an idea. I went and saw, there's a band called the Dirt Bombs. They're from Detroit. They're great. And, one of their singers had a song called I'm Through with White Girls. And it was, you know, there's a kind of funny little song about a white guy who, you know, was just all this, he started going to these clubs, these black clubs, and he was enticed by the sexuality of black women, all that kind of stuff. But it's also just kind of a funny song. And I thought it was a title. And so I came up with an idea for kind of a black romantic comedy based on that concept. Wrote that script. I can't believe it's been 10 years now. It's amazing. So I wrote that 10 years ago because I'm a big fan of romantic comedies. Like I think so many of the movies out now that you see that are kind of labeled as romantic comedies aren't as much romantic comedies. They're kind of comedies, or, you know, the whole term of chick flicks, which kind of throws people off, and you're immediately dismissing half your potential audience when guys I always liked, you know, the Woody Allen romantic comedies, and When Harry Met Sally and all those kind of guys. Those are movies that appeal to both sexes, and that's the kind of movie I liked. And so I tried to do a version of that with like less recognizable African American characters. And actually, one of our characters is African Canadian, so that's another.
Oh, cool.
So like it was kind of like that's kind of the goal, and so I wrote it. And, you know, I sent it out with my manager and expected Hollywood to come knocking down the door with offers and all these things that you expect to happen. And it was met with utter silence, of course. Until a friend I went to college with, Leah Johnson, who is the actress in the movie, she'd produced some shorts, and she was like, I want to make a feature. Do you have anything? And by this point, like, it's just been sitting in a drawer. I'm working on Arrested Development, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'll give you something to read. So I just gave her the script, and she was just like, okay, we're going to do this. And
cool.
I'm like, oh, all right, yeah, okay. And so, like, to me, again, like, you know, and again, like, everybody's doing something now, which I think is great. But, like, this was, like, it could have been 7 years ago. This is probably, like, 2004 we started talking about this for the first time. And so I guess that is 7 years ago, goodness. But, like, we started talking about it for the first time, and it's been sitting around for 3 years, and I'm just like, what do you mean we're going to do this? This is crazy. I expected it to be like, you know, like at most a DV cam and this and just some people and just going to be a, you know, seat of your pants kind of thing. And, she pulled it off. She got people to give money. She got, you know, a whole thing, and, ended up shooting, a movie. Jennifer Sharp directed it, and Anthony Montgomery was in it, he's on a sitcom now. I don't think it's a sitcom. I can't think it's a drama on VH1 now. But she pulled it off, and you know, and so the movie, we just kind of made it, and toured some black film festivals and got a decent enough reception. From there, it's, you know, it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix Instant Watch. It's, you know, been on cable. You know, I know the title puts off a lot of people. For those kind of like, and it's purposeful on my part, because like, again, like you're dealing with an indie movie in a very crowded marketplace, you know? And so like, it was purposefully provocative. And, you know, to me, if it turns people off, that's fine. It's, you know, whatever. Maybe you like it, maybe you won't like it. Any other kind of title that doesn't grab you as much, then nobody. I guarantee nobody would saw the movie if it wasn't called I'm Through with White Girls. That's always in my feeling, and I know people go back and forth about it and so on and so forth. And I'm a very liberal person with friends of all hues and colors and all that other kind of stuff, and I don't mean any offense by it. But that's also some of the, you know, judging a book by its cover thing that you get when you deal with titles. So it's a cute little movie about a couple who end up dating and almost breaking up and getting back together, because that's romantic comedy. So. But that was so that this was kind of done all on its own, and then, just kind of took off with a little life of its own.
Very, very cool. Well, it sounds fun. I love those indie things because it's like, it doesn't have the big studio money, and so you can be more playful with it, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like, it also, I mean, you're seeing it now with like the cost of production as far as like, with the enhancements in video and people getting their hands on these things, and, DSLR cameras and the red camera and all these kind of things. It's like more and more people are experimenting with making features and like short features and all these other kind of things. And so like, to me, like people always ask, it's like, what do I need to do to become a sitcom writer? And I'm like, well, again, you need to write, you need your spec, you need your spec pilot, blah, 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 all that other kind of stuff. But go out and shoot something too. It's the barrier to entry is so low now.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, people want to see that you have a unique voice, and that's what better way to do that. And it's hands-on, and you learn, and, we live in a world of hyphenates now where like, you're going to be a writer and an actor, and that's like package. It's Ricky Gervais who's like creates these things and he stars in them, and you get the voice, and his voice is perfect because it's what he's looking for. Or you're a director and a writer, or you're an actor and a director, all these kind of things, that allow you to kind of like really fine tune and hone your voice to what you exactly want it to be. So that's what and so it's great to me to see these things, and again, like, it's only been a few years, but I think it would have been a lot easier even now to make this movie and get it out to people, because it was also shot on film. Mm-hmm. So that was part of the issue of like, really scraping together to get some money to get this done, because, we handicapped ourselves in certain ways, while also giving it, like, again, a look and ability that kind of differentiated it from a lot of the smaller indie movies that are being made.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, certainly now the digital technology is there, but I mean, film's film.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, I think they made the right choice, definitely. And again, like, it got made, it got done, and all that other kind of stuff. But it was one of those things too, where you're like, you're still, it's hard out there to raise funds. And this was before some of the economic stuff had gone down, so the climate wasn't quite as difficult as it is now. But like, they knocked on a lot of doors because it just costs more too,
Mm-hmm. So. And so, I mean, back to TV land from My Boys, you went back to animation, but this time it's network animation.
Yep.
You were co-producer and writer on a Family Guy spinoff called The Cleveland Show. So compare that to your other experiences.
Oh, the funny thing is, like, I would say that's the most different of all the experiences, in that we have a massive staff on The Cleveland Show. For season 3, we had 17 writers.
17?
Yeah. We're about to start for writing in 2 weeks, and we're going to have, I think, 18 writers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like, it's completely, again, that's 3 times as many writers as I was working with last time, but we need them. I mean, like, and they're all very talented, very good people. It's just like, but that alone was culture shock when you're in that big a room, like, versus the small, very intimate kind of thing. It's a lot joke heavier show. It's been a learning experience for me. I like writing jokes. I come from a comedy background. I love the crafting of the comedy. I love, like, the perfect setup line that's like kind of hidden, so you don't even know you're setting up a joke to deliver a great punchline. I love all of that stuff. But again, like, even the show, like, Arrested Development, a lot of the comedy, there's great jokes written in the show, but a lot of the comedy came from a different place because it's live action, and you get expressions, and you get people being able to make a funny reaction to something. And in animation, while you have funny reactions to things, they're still drawn, so you don't have quite the detail that allows you to get a laugh in some place that you get in live action. So a lot of it is the words or their actions in a bigger, grander, way. That kind of, like, really, like, fine-tuning jokes and really writing jokes, and, where we'll sit there and have a spot where we, have a joke, or we're trying to beat a joke, and, we'll come up with a half a dozen or a dozen different options for what that joke could be. And then we kind of move on. And, there's a lot of that. So, like, that, and that's why you need so many people, and that's why you need so many funny people. That was, like, I think the big difference, just the amount of people and how joke heavy it is. It's joke, which is good. It is great to be a part of and to learn through and to, like, really, I mean, like, 'cause it's a muscle to me, like, joke writing. You talk to stand-ups who, and they're constantly writing jokes. That's what they do. That's their trade, and so being in a room with people who are that funny, who challenge you, and you got to come up with a joke for this, and you want them, and like some of the things we were talking about earlier, like these people, you're working for a lot of people. If you're going to succeed in this business, you're going to need to be able to make them laugh, or else you're not going to be able, and it doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It's just maybe you're not great for this show or what they do there. But like, it was definitely challenging at first because it was a switching on a light, a light switch that I hadn't quite worked as hard in quite a while. So it's good.
Well, and definitely you've had some good training to work up to that too. Between, Arrested Development, Everybody Hates Chris, and all that type of stuff. And also I've heard that there are writers who are kind of just joke writers who don't necessarily understand story as well. And it's nice when you can have both. Yeah.
I would say, I don't know if you're a sports fan or like I'm a big sports fan. It's like anything else where like, it's a team game almost, and so like you're looking to, a lot of times you have people who fill positions and roles and so you're going to need people who are just joke like powerhouses. People who, when nobody else can do it and they're tired, can come up with a bit out of nowhere to re-energize everybody and keep the room going, or people who will pull something out of left field. You definitely need those people. And like, I think you see, just because of the nature of the show, and I think a lot of it because like now it's a single camera comedies dominate in the networks and, a lot on cable too. And so like, I think the structure of a single camera comedy makes it more writer friendly in a way, in that like, it's harder to just be joke people. Like I wouldn't say like, no matter what show I've worked on, I don't think I've worked with anybody who's just a joke person. I've worked with extremely, extremely, extremely funny people who like just you're in tears every day, and they are the manic energy that keep you going, but they can also write a draft too, so like I've been lucky in that capacity too. People who've stand-ups who've been able to do that too, but I think a lot of that's too, it's because, at the one medium I haven't worked on a multi-camera show, so I don't know if that would be different where you need, because it's tape night and a joke's not working and you need a joke like that. And so like bring in the energy guys, the guys who can write jokes like that, and it's just, they can do it backwards in their sleep kind of thing. And so like, as many powerfully funny people as I've worked on, I would also say they know how to break a story and how to write all those other kind of things too. And everybody to a degree. It's not like, it's hard to be unfunny and just structurally sound, and it's hard to be, just funny and have no structure in a lot of the rooms I've been in. So I've been fortunate and haven't seen that so much, but like, you definitely hear about it. And everybody's got their strong suits, like, where they're like, oh yeah, they're a little better at this than they are at that, and they're a little better for this, and so yeah.
Very, very cool. So that sounds like it's been a fun run in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I got to say, I've been very fortunate.
So at this point in the podcast, we usually talk about breaking in tips. So if you can imagine sort of when you were a journalist out east, if you had met yourself then, knowing what you know now, what would you tell that person? Well,
a lot of things I'd say, like that's the breaking in tips are, because I think I was doing a lot of the things I needed to do to succeed in a way. It was just getting that foot in the door. To me, I always tell people, like, read everything, watch everything, create as much as you can. Like, that's a lot of the hard part, especially when you're younger. You're right out of school, or, you've got time, hopefully before you have too much of like family concerns and financial concerns. Go out and see as much stand-up as you can, especially in comedy. Watch every movie you can. Listen to music. Read like every book that you can, not just on filmmaking, just on fiction or whatever you kind of do. Like, consume the material. That's what you definitely want to do. You want to have a nice, strong foundation in what culture is, and know what you like, and work outside of your genre. Like, a lot of people are like, sci-fi comic book people, or they're really into sports, whatever. Like, work outside of that. Read Jane Austen because she's a great writer. Just like, really, if you really want to do this, you have to really be into the idea of writing and comedy and those kind of things. And so, like, spend a lot of time. It's not like you have to study it and be able to break it down and dissect it. If that's your method, that's fine. But like, also just like enjoy the medium too. Don't be somebody who just thinks everything sucks and I know what I'm doing. I think that's, and so if you get a joy out of it and you enjoy the medium and you're a student of it, that's great. I think that's the first thing that you have to kind of do. Then outside of that, I think really, like, everybody has different paths now. I would have encouraged myself to move to Los Angeles, even before I had the fellowship, especially for television writing. That's where a lot of the opportunities really are. It's where you're going to meet people. You'll talk to a lot of people out here, and they'll say that if you're out here long enough, you'll get a break. You'll rub elbows with the right person. You'll know somebody who knows somebody, or somebody will read something. It's really being prepared for when that opportunity comes. It's like having that right piece of material. The story I like to tell is with my manager now, who Larry Schumann, who currently manages me. I was temping at a law firm in Encino.
In a law firm?
Yeah, in a law firm in Encino. This is after the Nickelodeon Fellowship. I'm making like $12 an hour temping, maybe part-time. And I've been doing this for months. Okay, and I've got loans, I've got all this other kind of stuff. And I'm telling them, I was like, oh yeah, I may have to go out on these staffing meetings. They're like, yeah, okay, very good. And I was looking for a manager, and I talked to a friend of a friend who was a producer, and asked if she had any agents or anything that was looking for people, and she referred me to Larry, who became my manager. And this was, right before Arrested Development, so it's like 2003. It's the spring. Staffing things were going on at the time, and I had a piece of material that he really responded to, and it was that writing. And at that timing, and he was also like, he wasn't like, a lot of times people aren't looking for baby writers. This is a guy who represents Sean Ryan and The Shield and all these other kind of things. It's not necessarily, looking for that kind of thing, but he's also in a place where he said if he met a writer whose work he responded to, he was just going to work with them and not worry about like letting them get more seasoned, because he'd, kind of apparently passed on some guys who ended up becoming great writers just because they were, younger writers than he was used to. And so he was like, I was fortunate that he was in a place where he was doing that. I was also lucky, but lucky to have a kind of material that he responded to. So when, this friend said, hey, are you looking to read somebody? They're like, send it over. And then boom. And literally he called me. He's like, we need to meet tonight. So we can do meetings. And a few months, like within weeks, literally I'm meeting with showrunners on shows, on staff, on these staffing meetings, and then Arrested Development happened. So like it was, that to me only could happen in Los Angeles, in a lot of ways. I guess that's the long version of that. But again, like it doesn't have to mean anything. And again, you have these fellowship programs where they ask you to have your material, you write your material, and so on and so forth. And there's stand-up comedy, the way a lot of people get into these things. There's many different avenues, but a lot of it is, I think a lot of it's made easier out in LA. So I would have encouraged myself to move out to Los Angeles and just, everybody takes bets in life, and you might as well bet on yourself, for as long as you can. And that's, again, the way I look at it, which is a lot easier for me to say because I moved out here after having won a fellowship and had a job and all that other kind of stuff. So still, my wife is a musician, and she moved out here without those things. And so there's tons like that. And you see that, it's one of the comforting things about LA is that, you see that a lot of people kind of do that. If you're willing to make that leap, you'll find a community, and and if you work hard, you'll get a break, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that term, prepared lucky.
Yes, it was. A lot of things have to fall into place at the right time, but it was. If he was ready to read and it wasn't ready, if it wasn't good, then I just would have missed an opportunity, So, a lot of things fell into the right place. A lot of things happened in a way that was beneficial to me. And there are many, many other things that were involved in kind of all that shaking out the way it did. But if I hadn't, sat down at my desk and written for, a couple months prior to that or whatever it was, and prepared a new piece of material that I was really proud of and ready to go out with, then it wouldn't have meant anything. So.
Wonderful. Well, you have been very generous with your time, and I really, really appreciate you appearing on the podcast here. And I forgot to ask, are you on Twitter? Is there any way that people can contact you?
I am on Twitter. Courtney Lilly is my Twitter handle, which is also my name, so that's very convenient. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I don't, I'm not I have a lot of friends, especially the Cleveland Show friends, who tweet a lot of jokes. They're very funny people. I do that a little less. I sometimes share some stuff, but I also I love Twitter as a community. I love hearing what people are doing, and I love interacting with people through that. I literally, most days, I'm just way too exhausted to even think about extra jokes outside of work and to do that. I so applaud all the people who can do that. But sometimes, again, I'll forward some nice links. I'll share some stuff. And then every now and again, I've got a little insightful nuggets, perhaps, but goodness, if you sign up and you follow me, don't worry, you're not getting 15 tweets a day about a beet salad I'm eating.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks so much, Courtney, and best of luck to you. I guess you're back on the Cleveland show pretty soon?
Yep, we'll be starting up on the 27th of June with season 4 because we're a year ahead. So season 3 will start in September. It's very funny. And then we'll start writing season 4 in a couple weeks. Very,
very cool. Well, all the best, and thanks so much again.
All right. You too. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web. And by Final Draft script writing software, the entertainment industry standard for script writing worldwide.